Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got winter weather advisories out here for the Kobuk Valley, Greater Ambler area until 6 a.m. Sunday morning for gusty winds, snow, blowing snow, and some additional snow, 1 to 4 inches or more for tonight. And again, that's out until 6 a.m. Sunday morning. Conditions will improve. Also, winter weather advisories here for the eastern Norton Sound area into the Lotto Hills and the lower Yukon River Valley zone on out to the Yukon Delta. And that's also out until 6 a.m. Sunday for these same conditions. Gusty winds, additional snows, visibility is reduced in blowing snow to locally half a mile at times. And for today, a system going through the Panhandle brought some fairly significant rainfall amounts for the last 24 hours, as well as also to the Alaska Peninsula. Petersburg, nearly 2.5 inches of rain, while Falls Pass out west, they had 2.02 inches, shade over 2 inches, and Cold Bay picked up 1.82 inches. Also, they had winds gusting close to 60 miles an hour at Frontal Passage earlier today. And then Klawock, down there in Prince of Wales Island, they had 1 3/4 inches of precipitation. So a couple active systems affecting the state. On satellite, here's the one out west, front north-south here, Orient, kind of tilting as it moves eastward with the bent back occlusion extending from St. Lawrence Island all the way down to the Aleutians there, and upper level circulation out there towards Chimney in the colder air with snow showers out that way. Otherwise, mostly rain, gusty winds here at the main low center just north of the area there across the central Aleutians, Adak and Atka. Moisture coming northwards, that's where all the action was today. One of the locations here out west there with the gusty winds, pretty gusty winds occurring across some areas there. Cape Newham seeing gusts 71 miles an hour today and 55 miles an hour wind gusts at King Salmon, while Golovin up there on the south coast of the Seward Peninsula, they had gusts of around 40 miles per hour. And up along the Arctic coast, band of moisture there gave some areas of snow with the gusty winds, blowing snow, winds about 25 to 35 miles per hour, and starting to improve now on the west side there. So winds coming down, blizzard warning that's been out there ending shortly, or due to end shortly. Otherwise, not too bad here on the North Gulf Coast and over the eastern interior. Pretty dry with lighter winds. And then this system cutting through the Panhandle, so earlier on, still off the coast, but rolling on through, kind of dragging across southern areas today, but rain becoming more showery and tapering off with possible clearing showing up here along the coast. Definitely some clearing up along the north coast into the Copper River Basin. On the chart today, high pressure building over the western Copper River Basin, 1,025 millibars. That'll continue to strengthen this evening and overnight tonight. Otherwise, system moving off into the Northwest Territories. Front dragging across southern Panhandle, kept the rain going a little longer and did to the north there. But again, all areas starting to taper off now, becoming more showery with some clearing periods. See basically high pressure out to your west. This system being directed mostly to the north initially. Very slow movement eastward here due to the high pressure over the northeast Pacific from the Gulf, and also a loft extending into the area. So that's going to direct most of this up to the north with just very slow eastward progression. Whole system will be weakening as it tracks north. Otherwise, today the areas of snow along the entire Arctic coast with the blowing snow on the west side, and then some snow here, Kivalina, up in and along the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range area, tapering off into the Koyukuk Valley areas, or the Koyukuk Valley, northern upper Yukon Valley. Areas of light snow today with areas of snow and blowing snow here across the southwest interior, mostly west of the Kuskokwim Valley location. Just some snow showers along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. And then the gusty winds I mentioned, 55 miles an hour, that keeping the precipitation out at King Salmon this afternoon. Otherwise, As I mentioned, the heavier rain along the Alaska Peninsula today. In the last 24 hours, front having moved east to Cold Bay, winds coming down there, but still pretty breezy, rather tight gradients, seeing gusts 30 to 50 miles per hour here across central Aleutians in toward the Fox Islands. And then conditions improving with the colder air aloft, snowfall levels down to sea level towards Shimei and Attu. For tonight, this front, again, big push off to the north, very little movement to the east, but it does pull off to the eastward a little bit here. That'll bring a chance of moisture to the southwest side of Kodiak Island late tonight. Otherwise dry, maybe a shower or two developing along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. No change here for Cook Inlet. Variable clouds here over the eastern interior, high pressure up to 1,434 millibars over the Copper River Basin. Keeping the east side dry, north slope dry. Diminishing winds on the east side, staying pretty breezy on the west side with snow. Kotzebue Sound, Kivalina to the northwest coast, across Seward Peninsula into the Yukon Delta where that winter weather advisory is out through tonight. Also up over the Kobuk Valley. Isolated snow showers really improving here over the Aleutians southern Bering Sea area. High pressure drying it out continues. Look for decreasing clouds tonight over the Panhandle and pretty much dry everywhere over that way. And then for tomorrow, this low edging a little farther to the northeast here. But otherwise, the southeast coast under the influence of big area high pressure now kind of shifts off. Actually, that's another center, this one weakening, but generally holding, keeping it mostly sunny. Copper River Basin up the eastern interior to north of Eagle, possibly Old Crow, but definitely dry conditions, mostly sunny skies. Tomorrow, light winds for the entire southeast coast. This front weakening. Chance of rain, Kodiak Island at times, maybe some showers developing along the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula, some moisture scooting up to the northwest here, but nothing getting into Valdez or very far westward in Turnagain Arm. Portage, Whittier, probably the best chance, maybe Seward, and that's about it. Precipitation, rain or snow here in the west, mostly from the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, back across Kuskokwim Valley. And that tends to increase as slow tracking northward, even though it's weakening. Enough gradient there to keep blowing snow going over the Seward Peninsula, up along the northwest coast. And eastern north slope, not too bad, down sloping off the Brooks Range, but the west side still a chance of snow. High pressure really calming it down here out over the Bering Sea. You can just see the edge of the next system there pushing eastward. And then for Monday, that brings storm force winds back into the western and then the west central Aleutians during the day with gales into Adak and Atka with rain. Otherwise, high pressure keeps it nice over the eastern Bering and northern Bering down across the Alaska Peninsula. This weak system moves northward, so it looks wet for Kodiak Island. Wind's not much of a problem. Chance of moisture along the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, scattered snow showers, light snow showers here over the western central interior, mostly dry to the east. And the Panhandle sees a chance of rain in the afternoon along the north coast. Otherwise, staying fair and dry down to the south. Low temperatures tonight, 25 to 35 there for the Panhandle. A little below zero, Copper River Basin up the east side and then along the Arctic coast. Much milder to the west and southwest under mild southerly flow, lower 30s to mid 30s. And then the highs tomorrow, 35 to 40 here. Lower 40s, southern Kuskokwim Valley down into northeast Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. Mid 30s, south central Alaska, 35 to 40 in the Panhandle. Single numbers here, generally below 20 on the east side, but Arctic coast warming up into the mid 20s on the west side, about 3 at Kaktovik. Lows the following morning. A little below zero, but not too far, Copper River Basin. Above zero for the Arctic coast, 15 to 25 in the west. And then the highs Monday afternoon, mid-20s on the eastern or the central Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving along into flying weather, big area IFR here over the northeast Bering on up into the Bering Strait there, catching the Seward Peninsula along the southwest coast and inland here over the southwest mountains. Otherwise, marginal VFR mostly here for the Aleutians. Kodiak Island, marginal on the southwest side there, some VFR up into southern Cook Inlet across the Barrens, Copper River Basin into the central and east central interior looking pretty good. North slope, we got an area of VFR there with IFR out along the coast, mostly VFR for the Panhandle. Tomorrow afternoon, eastern and central interior, VFR. Pick up the marginal VFR here, central Cook Inlet over toward the western Alaska Range, on down into Bristol Bay with IFR, Togiak Bay, right up the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, across Norton Sound to the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula here, then back up to the northwest coast. VFR looks like mostly Adak, but all of Atka and into the southern Bering, with IFR now along the east side of Kodiak up to the southern Kenai Peninsula. Good VFR for the Panhandle, eastern North Gulf Coast, most of Prince William Sound. And for the following morning, Monday morning, IFR slowly edging in toward the far western Aleutians of the next system, marginal to Atka, pretty good for the Fox Islands. IFR, Bristol Bay, up into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, into Augustine Island area, or Kamishak Bay, all of Kodiak, pretty IFR. Better conditions here over the eastern interior, marginal back to the west, and same pattern for the Arctic coast north slope. And we got some IFR sliding into the south coast of the Panhandle, otherwise VFR. And for the afternoon, that pulls back a little bit there, so mostly VFR here, except up northland, Canal Glacier Bay, kind of marginal. IFR, Gulf of Alaska to the coast of the Kenai Peninsula, socked in across Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, here into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. VFR back to the northwest here, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, right up through the Bering Strait, just a swath of marginal VFR here northeastward to the Brooks Range, otherwise VFR, eastern interior areas. Passes. For Anatuvik, marginal VFR throughout the day tomorrow, and that same forecast holds for Adigan as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasionally marginal, mostly. And for Rainy, marginal VFR looks like a good forecast, but windy VFR. And Isabel, same forecast, mostly clear skies, or at least the mid and high level clouds. And Mintasta, also VFR. Tanita, VFR as well. Portage, though, marginal VFR, moisture hanging in the western Prince William Sound area, and so mostly probably lowest conditions here on the eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, we've got a warm pocket here on those southerly winds, gets up 2,000 feet tomorrow morning here, right over the central interior areas. Otherwise, the main area of 2,000 feet down here along the North Gulf Coast, and still a pretty good gradient here across the Panhandle. 8,000 feet now, retreated back a little bit to the south from today, down toward Queen Charlotte Islands, out to the west at the surface here, north of the Pribilofs, cutting across northern Bristol Bay, and 2,000 feet though, way off the map. For icing, not really anything too significant tomorrow. We've got some areas of here for Bristol Bay, and possible light, I'd say mostly light mixed or rime icing here above 6,000 feet, with probably none of the moderate variety here across the Seward Peninsula and the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Jet stream, high pressure, ridging right up across the eastern interior, keeping the storminess back to the west here a little bit there with southerly flows, 70 to 90 knots, 9,000 feet stronger here, low south of the Gulf of Alaska, east-southeast 25 to 35, into the Kenai, turning south up to 50 knots, strongest winds right through this area. Much lighter over the Aleutians, starting to pick up out west, and the Panhandle pretty light, east-southeast at 10, 3,000 feet, 5 to 15 here over the Panhandle, pretty light in the Gulf of Alaska, 20 knots, right over turning an arm, 25 Kodiak Island, stronger southerlies here with this system lifting northward, 35 to 50 knots, lighter up toward the Arctic coastal areas, and pretty good out here over the Bering Sea, maybe 20 to 25. And then wrapping around the south side, 30 to 35, or 25 to 30 here, coming in toward the Yukon Delta coast, but pretty light for the Alaska Peninsula. And again, picking up to 25 tomorrow afternoon, mainly over Shimei and Attu. Turbulence-wise, the southerly flow, moderate chop, a good bed here over the central interior back to the west, all the way down to Kodiak Island, and light to isolated moderate for the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians.
Technology. It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the earth and grows our food. While the sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the sun doesn't stay at the sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. And this is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
The GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy. And then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from the space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system is going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Today's sea ice analysis showing about 3 to 5 tenths here on the north side of St. Matthew Island now. And winds are going to become northwest here over the next couple of days. So you're going to want to watch out for the area just south of the island, about right in that location. And it looks like late in the week they'll turn around to southeast, and then things might reverse, but that's several days off. The coastal water forecast here on the south coast of the Panhandle, east to southeast 15 to 20, easterlies 15 on the north coast, north 20 for Lynn Canal, 15 Stevens Passage, and light northerlies for Clarence Strait. Following day we got light winds from the east to north, or actually north for Lynn Canal, otherwise central southern inside waters east-northeast at 10, very light 2 to 4 foot seas. Southeast 20-25 on the south coast, east-southeast 30 knots, north side with seas up to 11 feet. Prince William Sound, light northeast winds, same thing for northern Cook Inlet, east 20 on the eastern North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories on the west side, and southeast 25 for the Barrens, increased to 30 knots into Kamishak Bay, southern Cook Inlet, northeast at 20. Monday, those pick up. We got small craft advisories out all of Cook Inlet, north 25 to 30 knots. Gales for Kamishak Bay, northeast 35. Easterlies at 30 knots here for the western North Gulf Coast, Barren Islands, and minimum gales at 35 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound coming up a little, but not too bad, northeast 20, seas 4 feet. And for Kodiak Island, southeast 20-25 tomorrow, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, southeast at 30, and the Alaska Peninsula, south 20 to 30 knots, southeast 30 for Bristol Bay with seas at 8 feet. And for Monday, really lightening up out here. South winds are just actually called variable 10 here for the peninsula with seas 5, but still 11 feet in the Pacific zone. And Bristol Bay, light northerlies at 10. West 15 from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, and then northeast 15 on the east side of Kodiak here, but stronger. Shelikof Strait up to 25 knots, and those seas 5 feet. For the Fox Islands tomorrow, we've got west-southwest 20 to 25 with seas running 13 to 21 feet. Adak and Atka kind of in a break here, 15-knot winds, and then easterlies increase to gale late tomorrow afternoon out towards Shimian at 2. And then overnight tomorrow night and into Monday, those pick up the storm force first out here in the west and then slowly advance eastward, but not quite reaching Adak Well, actually, it does on the south side here. Storms southeast increasing 45 to 50 in the afternoon on Monday with the 55 knots all day out west, and gales coming in toward Nikolsky, and then 20 to 25 out of the southeast front Alaska Island. And for the southwest coast, south winds 40 knots tomorrow. Good strong winds continue out here with gales right up into the Bering Strait, including Norton Sound, southeast 35 there. Northwest 30 behind the front here for St. Matthew Island. West 25 behind the front for the Pribilof. Seas 15 feet. And then much lighter conditions in store for Monday here. Northerlies 10 to 15 along the coast. Just 10 knot winds from the north-northwest for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. But still northeast at about 25 for St. Matthew Island. All of the central and east side here, east 30 knots. But brisk wind advisories all the way down here across the Chukchi Sea to the Bering Strait. Southeast, though, from Wales up to Cape Thompson. And then for the outlook on Monday, those switch direction. West-northwest 15 from Cape Beaufort down across the Chukchi Sea. West 25 on the western coast. 25 knot brisk wind advisory winds for the central coast, but much lighter on the east side, south to southwest at 15. And for tonight, again, rather strong front here with a good gradient along it, especially in advance of this northward tracking low here, gradually weakening. So that keeps winter weather advisories in effect for the Yukon Delta up on to the Nulato Hills as well as the Kobuk Valley until 6 a.m. Sunday morning. Stays fair with good high pressure over the east, dries out over the Panhandle. And for tomorrow, stays mostly sunny here for the southeast coast, mostly sunny eastern interior, and less wind and less precipitation here in the west with this front trying to push eastward and weakening as it goes, as well as the low weakening as it tracks northward. And then for Monday, this weak system comes up and brings us some moisture into Kodiak Island, chance of rain along the North Gulf Coast, or rain and snow mixed, scattered showers over the western interior, dry in the east, chance of rain on the north coast of the Panhandle, and storm force winds push in across the western and central Aleutians. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.